Impact Interview is sponsored by the Pocono Mountains, where small-town charm meets big adventures. Book your trip today by visiting PoconoMountains.com.
Welcome back to Nittany Game Week. We have been looking forward to having our next guest on all season long. We think the timing is perfect to do it midway point of the year because she has a unique perspective on the 4 West Coast teams that have joined the Big Ten Conference. Ashley Adamson was part of the Pac-12 network from its inception in 2012, and after the recent changes, joined the Big Ten Network to offer her expertise. Ashley also hosts her own podcast, Your Mom, where she talks about a whole range of things well beyond sports. Ashley, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, so we're halfway through, like we mentioned, through this first newly expanded football season. Before we turn to the second half, I want to ask you what are some of the things that maybe met your expectations and some of the things that fell a little bit short. This is our impact interview, so really the question is, what about the impact, right, for the 4 new schools, for them, and also for the teams that they've had to face?
Yeah, I mean, that is the big thing. And I would say coming in, right, change is always hard and people aren't sure exactly what it's going to look like. And there was a lot of excitement and anticipation for what it could look like with these 4 new schools and all the debate about style of play and what would these 4 new programs bring to the league? Would the West Coast schools be ready for the physicality of the Big Ten? And I think, guys, with a relatively small sample size, I think the short answer is yes. It's been everything that you've wanted and more. If you just look at strictly the record, 6-9 in league play, which isn't anything to write home about yet. But part of that obviously is an 0-4 UCLA team that's finding its way under a new head coach. But the marquee games and Washington's win at home over Michigan and the scene there in Seattle, Oregon's win over Ohio State this past week and the scene in Eugene, those carry a ton of weight. And then you look at USC Penn State from week 7. And that game, I mean, if you're a Trojan fan, like it was the third excruciating conference loss. But for Penn State to go on the road and to win that game in the fashion that they did, that fourth quarter drive to force overtime was just an absolute thing of beauty. Like, put that in the Louvre. It has been as entertaining as we could have hoped for in the expansion era.
Ashley, it's Jay here, and I want to talk a little bit about you personally in terms of you started with the Pac-12 network 12 years ago. You began your podcast, Your Mom, and now you're with the Big Ten Network. For all the on-camera work that you do, how important is it for you and others that would like to do what you do to have the ability to write and draft your own stories?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I had a professor say to me that the most important thing that you need to be able to do if you want to work in media is to be able to write, right? Like writing is at the core of all of it. And I think that knowing the power and the impact of stories, like in our business, guys, we get so bogged down, and I do it and I have to fight against it and all the numbers. And the stats are interesting and the numbers paint a picture and you can learn a lot from analytics, but our brains are not wired to remember stats and numbers. Like our brains are wired to care about and know stories and remember stories. So I think that has been one of the best things about coming in and covering this league is all of the stories that I've gotten to learn along the way. And, it's been a while since I started a new job, and you just think about all of the stories that you got to tell and all the stories that you're going to get to tell. It is by far the best part of what we do.
Hey, this is Tom Bradley. How much of an adjustment do you think is still ahead for the Pac-12 schools like USC and UCLA in order to become part of the upper echelon of the Big Ten?
Yeah, and I think you look at all 4 of the new schools, and each of them are in a little bit of a different place. Like Oregon is, in the lead in terms of what Dan Lanning has been able to bring in and do and the blueprint that he came in with and the plan. He said when he came in, I mean, this is a guy that came from the SEC and knew what it looked like up front to have teams that can really match you in the trenches. And he knew what was coming into the Big Ten. And so I think for Oregon, they're ahead of the curve. And we saw that in that they were able to beat Ohio State in an epic game on Saturday. But I think you then look at the bottom, and UCLA, they've got a lot of growing pains and they've got a lot of work to do. Now, did they show signs of life and could they have easily beaten Minnesota? Yes, absolutely. So that thing you hope is headed in the right direction. Washington is a really interesting one to me. You know, we got to know Jed Fish really well when he was at Arizona, and watching what he was able to do in Tucson, taking a team that won one game his first year as a first-time head coach and having them ranked, you know, top 11 in the country by the time he left in his third year. It was remarkable, the turnaround. And in this new world of college athletics that we're in with the transfer portal and NIL, the rebuild time for programs is different than it used to be. And so I think Washington is going to be a team once he brought in so many new guys and he's got a great staff with a ton of NFL pedigree on it. But Seattle is a place that I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what the next year or two looks like under Jed Fish. It's been awesome to see how they have matched up and the battles that they've been back and forth, even at this early point in the season.